Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now, in this video I'm hoping to attempt to try and add a suntan to this image of this lady here. And this was the sort of end result that I came up with, which may be a little bit over the top. I probably should have toned this back slightly, but you can see the difference that's made between the two images. Now this video is an adaptation of a video by a company or person called PHLEARN. I think you just pronounce it PHLEARN, but if you want to use the same image that I have done, I've got this from pixabay.com, and I will add a link to this in the description when I put this up to YouTube. And if you want to check out the original Photoshop tutorial, it is how to get a tan in Photoshop by PHLEARN, and as you can see it's had like over 105,000 views. And I have tried to adapt this for Affinity Photo as best I can. I've sort of paused it on this screen because you can see that this is one part where I've struggled to adapt Affinity Photo from the Photoshop tutorial, because they're doing layer styles and he's got a sort of a slider here that he's moving the tones, the blending sort of up and down for the shadows, and I've done my best to sort of recreate what he's doing in the way that Affinity Photo works. So it may not be 100% perfect, and you may want to sort of tinker slightly with what I've had to do to sort of try and get close to this video. Now, one thing I will say about this is that when I scrolled down through the sort of like the comments and what have you, there were some people making sort of slight moans and complaints about why he hadn't masked off the eyes and the lips and what have you, so that the tone effect is sort of affecting them, which is sort of, when I went through my trial run following what he was doing and getting to this image, I just followed his example, and so the eyes and the lips and the hair were all affected by the various layers I'd added to get the tan. So in this tutorial, when I redo this, I'm going to start off by trying to mask off these areas to protect them. It is not something I've practiced yet, so whether this works or not we will find out by the time we get to the end of this video. And if it doesn't work, you can disregard the first part of this video and just do it without masking off certain areas. Now, I would also point out that, like PHLEARN's tutorial, he went for an image when there was a plain white background, which is what I have done as well. But you may want to add this to pictures of yourself or your family or what have you, and you may not have the luxury of a nice white plain background, in which case you will probably have to mask off that as well, by cutting out the model or what have you, and sort of layer mask to sort of hide the background so that that doesn't get affected with the changes you're going to make to the skin tones. So coming back to this original image, the first thing I want to do now is select the areas I want to protect. Now this could be quite a long drawn out process. So I'm going to try and do this as quick as possible. So I'm going to zoom in to the lips, get the selection brush, make sure I'm on add, and I'm just gonna turn the brush size down a bit. I freely admit this is not going to be perfect. If I was doing this properly, I'd probably use maybe the pen tool or some other tool to get a better selection. So I'm just going to subtract some of this that I've done. Right, go back to add. No, that's on subtract still, add. Right, like I said, I'm not going to be too fussy about my selection here. This is only for example. So I've got that lips. I'm now going to come up to the eyes, make sure I'm on add. Yeah, that's close enough for that one. And then this one here. Oops, Control and Z to go back slightly. I have to come to subtract. Right, that's close enough, I think, for the eyes and the lips for this very quick selection that I'm doing. I'll press Control and 0 to zoom out. So the next thing I want to get is the hair. So make sure I'm on add, and for the main part I don't have to be too fussy about the where I'm selecting, but I'm not going to come too close to the edges at the moment. Right, so now I'm a bit closer, I'll zoom in. Almost there. And obviously it depends on your image as to how so much flyaway hair there is to incorporate. Right, so now I've got that close. Let me center this slightly. There we go. I'm now going to come up to the refine button. And with the refine option, and it's on matte here, I'm just going to paint over these stray hairs. Wait for Affinity Photo to do its thing. It is always better, really, I think, to do this in small steps, try and do the whole lot in one go, because then Affinity Photo has a better chance of doing this quicker, because you don't have to wait forever for it to try and do the selections, you know, a mass selection all in one hit. You may just need to go over some areas a couple of times, and if, like me, you do it quite quickly, you then have to wait for Affinity Photo to catch up and do its selection process 3 or 4 times, and you can't do anything while it's doing that anyway. So sorry, this is sort of dragging on slightly, but there's no way around sort of really getting these fine hairs unless you do something like this. Just do a few up there. And then there's a few down here beside the ear. Let's go over that once more. Right. Just double check I haven't missed anything up here. Right, yeah, I'm not certain whether this will work, but I'll just include some of the eyebrows here. Right, that will do for the quickness I need for this. I'll just do Control and 0 to zoom out, and I've got this as output as a selection, so I'll just click apply, and there you can see how it is, you know, the selection area that's been made. Now the thing I need to do now is to make this layer unhighlighted. I think you can do it from the, if I use the node mode and click somewhere out here, yeah, anywhere out here not in the picture, that will become unhighlighted. I want to do this because I'm going to add a layer mask, but if the layer is highlighted and I add a layer mask, it will attach the layer mask to the layer that is highlighted. But if you have no layers highlighted and you click layer mask, it will make the layer mask all by itself on its own layer. So as you can see there, the areas that I've made with this layer mask. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press Control and D to get rid of that selection area, and I'm going to duplicate this layer mask twice. So right click and come to duplicate, or you can just press Control and J. So I have 3 versions of that layer mask, and then I'm going to hide all these, and I will use them later as and when I want them. Now you could probably get away with not doing this part, maybe just using one and using the reselect option, but sometimes I find that it works and sometimes it doesn't. So to be on the safe side, I've made 3 copies of it, which I will then add to the layers as and when I need them. So coming back to the background layer, and we are going to start the tutorial proper, because this first part about the selecting the eyes and what have you was not in the original tutorial. So what we need to do is to highlight or affect the highlights and the shadows of the skin tones, and I'm going to have to do that in sort of 2 different colours and 2 different ways. So we're going to first try and affect the highlights. So what we need now is a new fill layer. Now you can do this by coming up to Layer, and one of the options is new fill layer, or you can just press F5 and it will make a new layer with a solid color, whichever color was highlighted as your foreground color at the start, which in my case it was white, but you can now change the color to whatever you want. So what we want is a sort of orange color for a suntan. Now this probably might work better if you click on this square box up here and come to boxes, and then you can find the sort of color range that you want, so like the orange here, and then find a color by clicking around wherever you want to find a sort of skin tone that you like the look of, which is all very trial and error, but that's probably, if you don't know where, you don't have a start point to go from, it's sort of probably the best way of doing it rather than going from using the sliders. Now I'm going to use the sliders because while I was watching the video, I made a note of the colours that the gentleman picked in his video, so I can just type them in, and it was 214 in the red, 180 in the green, and 136 in the blue. So then after that, what he did was change the blend mode of that layer to color burn. So as you can see now, we've already made an effect on this image of this girl. I've just already added this suntan, and we, like I said, we just need this to affect the highlights, because at the moment this color is affecting both the light areas and the dark areas, and in certain cases it can make the dark areas very dark. It's not so much on this particular image, but on the image that the gentleman did in his video, it was like almost black, some of the shadows on that girl's face that he was using, the image he was using. So what we need to do is change the blend mode of this layer, and this is the part that I was telling you about where I've had to try and find a way to do this in Affinity Photo, because you couldn't do it the same way as he did it in Photoshop. Now I think the way to do this is to, next to where it says the blending mode options, there's a little cog. I put the cursor over it, you can see it comes up, blend ranges. So you click on that and you get this blend range options where you can move these nodes around to change the blending range. Now as I understand it, the left hand side is where the shadows are within this graph, and the right hand side is where the highlights are. So as I don't want the effect to have any effect on the shadows, I'm going to drag this node down right to the bottom, and I'm hoping if I keep moving this up and down you can see that that is it's more noticeable on the hair actually. If I, at the moment that hair is quite dark, and if I bring this down, the hair is coming much more back to its more natural lighter red colour. So once I brought this right the way down to the bottom, I'll just click on the X to close it, and again I'll just turn this on and off, and you can see the effect that that is having. So the next thing I want to do is you can if you want at any time sort of, because this layer is still highlighted and it's still set on the colours that I had. If you don't like the way this looks at the moment, you could go back and pick a new colour. So if I go, for example, I'll change this to 198, 148 and 115. Now that is a slightly different colour. So once you've made this layer, or any of the layers, you can always go back and tinker with them, which is the beauty of doing things in layers. So again, if I turn this on and off, so I must admit, I personally, these are the colours that the gentleman ended up with, but I must admit I quite preferred the ones I had before, so I'm going to go back to those. So that's 214, 180, 136, because it's a slightly lighter tan, it's not so overpowering. But it's all down to your image and your personal taste as to which colour you use. So now this is where I'm going to use one of my layer masks, and I'm going to click one of these, and then I'm going to just click and drag it until you get that blue line that's coming in between fill and background, and then I will let go, and now that mask will be part of this layer. I will just activate it, and by doing that, as you can see, as it is at the moment, it is let in the effect on the eyes, the lips and the hair, and it's sort of taking the effect away from the skin. So I need to invert this, and to do that I can press Control and I, and there you can see that the eyes have now gone back to being white, the hair is gone back to its lighter red colour, and the lips were as they were. So hopefully you can see by adding that mask I've protected those areas. So I can now move on to the next step, and to do that I need to add a new fill layer, solid fill layer. So you, like I said, you can either do it from the layers menu, or you can just press F5, and as the colour that we use on that previous layer was already set as the foreground colour, the fill layer will just pick that colour, but we are going to change that because now we want to affect the darker areas. So we want a darker, sort of more tan colour, and the colours I'm going to use is 155 for the red, 123 for the green, and 92 for the blue. And again, we're going to change the blending mode, but this time we're not going to use color burn, we're going to use multiply, which, as you can see, has not just affected the model but also all the background as well, but we'll remove that in a minute. So like before, I'm going to click on this cog, which is next to the blending modes. I'll move this over there. So this time what we want to do is to remove the pixels from the highlights, because before we removed them from the shadows, and I did that by dragging down the left hand side, but this time I'm going to drag down the right hand side to remove the effect of the pixels on the light areas. So if I come down to the bottom on the left here, we've got our white background back, but you can move this along the bottom here to alter how much effect this is having on all the darker pixels, because if I bring it right over here to the left, it's having sort of no effect on any of the pixels. And I'm hoping, especially if you look at the hair in this, as I move this along the bottom, that's having no effect on the darker hair, and as it comes more and more to the right, it's making the hair darker. But it is really the skin tones we need to be looking at, and you just got to find a point that you're happy with. I'm gonna try it roughly about there. I'm happy with the effect it's having. I like that effect, so I'll just click that to get rid of it. So much like before, I'm going to click this second mask that I made, and I'm going to drag it down to be part of this layer. I'm going to activate that mask, and then I'm going to press Ctrl and I to invert it so that it is the effect of that layer is not doing anything to the hair, the eyes or the lips. So next thing we want to do is you can, like I said before, you can have a tinker with the colours if you're not happy with what it is, because I mean the gentleman did it in his video. He changed his from where it was to 157, then 133, 133, and then 103. So a very subtle change, but like I said, it depends on your model and your personal taste as to how you alter it, but this time I will leave it where it is. So the next thing we want to do is to add an adjustment layer. So I come to the adjustments tab, and the one we want is selective color, which is down here, the one with this sort of like multicolored circle here. Click on that. If I come back to the layers here, the selective color adjustment layer comes with its own layer mask, but I'm hoping I can alter that by adding this last layer mask to it in a minute. But like I said, it's not something I've actually tried yet, so this will be trial and error. So what we want is to be on the color we want is red, which by default is what it is, but so we can leave it on reds. So it's now a case of moving these sliders to alter the color tones, because if I go down to if I reduce the cyan down to 0, you bring the red back, and if you move it up, you add a bit of, you knock back some of that red. And the same goes here. You can, if you drop down the magenta, it makes it yellower, and if you come up, you make the reds much redder, and sort of vice versa. If you drop the yellows, you'll bring back some of those reds, and go up in the yellows, you make it a very yellow tan. So I'm going to set mine on 46% cyan, and the magenta I'm going to come down to -5%, and the yellow I'm going to come down to -23, 22, 23 is going to do, and then I'll just click on the X to close that. Now this is going to be interesting to see whether this works. I'm going to click and drag this onto there, make this mask active, press Ctrl and I, there we go. Yeah, so I think that's quite good. So I will then just hold down the Shift key and click on the bottom of these 3 adjustment layers, and then that way I can turn them all on and off at the same time. So that was the original image, and this is the image with the tan added, and with the eyes, lips and hairs protected by the various layer masks that I made before. So you could sort of finish it here, or you can go back to the various layers and tinker with the colors, or you can tinker with the opacities of those certain layers, because even now I think this is maybe slightly too much. So I'm going to do the bottom of my adjustments here, and I'm just going to lower the opacity of that effect down to about 79-80%. Oh, 79%, it's close enough to 80%. So again, I can select all these layers, and that is the difference that these have made. So this was the first version I did. This was the one without the protecting the lips and the eyes and the hair, and this is the one where the eyes and lips and hair have been protected by the layer masks that I've added. So that is basically the end of this video. I hope you can use it in some way, and I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for watching, and thank you for PHLEARN for their original that I have adapted. I hope they don't mind that I've adapted it. So once again, thank you for watching, and goodbye.